What's up, guys? Welcome back to Biopilot Arms. Today we have a piece of American history, the 1899 KRAG-JORGENSEN. And this has got to be one of my favorite looking guns for the uniqueness and everything that goes into this firearm and the way that it was manufactured. So today we're going to take a look at this gun, we're going to do a review on it, and we're going to get into the history behind this gun. This is a model 1899 KRAG-JORGENSEN. The 3040 KRAG-JORGENSEN is pronounced Jorgensen, not Jorgensen. It's Norwegian. We'll get to that in a minute. But the 3040 in the name is the 30 Army with 40 grains of powder behind it. That powder, of course, being smokeless. It is one of the first smokeless rifles, but it was the first smokeless rifle that the United States Army decided to use as a service weapon. But this model 1899 KRAG-JORGENSEN also does have a safety. It has a flip safety up there like that. The way that this thing comes apart is actually you would pull it back, and I can't do it because I have this pinhole sight on there, but this top arm here would actually come up and you would twist the bolt over like that sideways, and then it would just come out. It gets hot, really, really hot. Because there's no upper portion of this, because they removed it when they sporterized this, it gets really hot. I can't wrap all the way around because it just burns my fingers. So I have to do it like this, and I have not the best grip. I'm gonna look at getting that top wood furniture for this thing because it's very difficult to shoot without it. The action is pretty smooth if you brace it against your hip and clean it. Taking those 6 shots, trying to chamber around from up here is a little bit difficult with a dirty gun. I shot a little bit through this at the very beginning, not so bad. Now it's a little bit difficult. It does need a cleaning, so the longer that you shoot it, the harder the action becomes. Really trying to do it from up here, it's not the pull back that's the issue, it's trying to put it back into battery that's a little difficult. The other thing that I kind of dislike about this is, well, the front sight on this is bent. And when I got it, it was bent the other way. And on the way here, it has bent the other direction. So I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but it did bend, and that kind of throws it off a little bit, unfortunately. I like the way that this loads. For a gun from 1899, it's pretty damn good. I'll give it that. The metal butt plate on this is not the best, considering, you know, it's metal. Now, this doesn't really kick that much because it's not a high-powered cartridge. It's, you know, only 2,000 FPS, but the metal butt plate really makes it dig into your shoulder a little bit more, and I don't really like that. It's not comfortable. The magazine cutoff works pretty well. The safety works pretty well. Overall, for it being 126 years old, I'd say it holds up pretty well. Alright, well, that time wasn't actually so bad. It was worse before. Maybe it's just because it's not as hot anymore. But, you know, after about six rounds, yeah, it gets a little hot. But I had already put some through it, so maybe it's just because I let it cool down that it was a little bit easier on the action, a little bit easier to shoot. But it's not that bad, and honestly, even with the pinhole sight that whoever sporterized this put on this thing, even with the slightly bent front sight, it's really not too hard to hit the target. Now, as I said, this is a Norwegian rifle. It was made by two Norwegians, Ole Krag and KRAG-JORGENSEN. Now, the 3040 in the name, 3040 KRAG-JORGENSEN, stands for the size of the bullet and the number of powder grains in the casing. 30 being the 30 Army and 40 being the number of grains in the casing, which is not a whole lot when you think about it. For comparison, I have the 3040 Krag right here, and then a 7.62. And you can see the size of the casing is very different, even though the bullets are almost similar in size. So the 3040 Krag actually only has 40 grains inside of it, compared to the 7.62, which has 124 grains. So I totally forgot to bring Dr. Peppers with me, so I found this non-punctured can on the ground and filled it with water. That's gonna have to be our DP test for today. Punched a pretty good hole right through it. Did a better job than I was thinking. So really, the 3040 is not that powerful compared to today's cartridges, but at the time, it was sufficient for what we wanted, considering we were kind of behind in the times. We'll get to that in a minute. At the time, many repeating rifles were tube-fed and were easily damaged just by dropping it or whatever. So if you have a tube that runs along the whole length and you just drop your gun, well, you ding the tube and then it doesn't feed anything anymore or has difficulty feeding, which causes issues. Then you also have the problem of weight distribution with a tube-fed magazine. You see, if you have a tube-fed magazine and you're aiming down your sights, as the tube empties, then the weight distribution changes, which means that you're going to be going from here to a slight raise without even necessarily noticing as you empty the magazine if you're rapidly firing those rounds out of the gun. Now, with that being said, they also didn't want to do a central magazine that stuck out the bottom like this. Because most of the magazines at that time were single stack, and so once you started getting past 5-10 rounds, it became obnoxiously long to have magazines. Think of it like this. You're loading your gun from the top with, stripper clips and everything, and you have a magazine sticking out the bottom pretty far if you want anything above like 10 rounds. So that means that it's hard to go prone because now you have a magazine in the way. And then you also have the problem of when you put it on a sling on your back, it, jangling around and the magazine hitting you in the ribs and, hitting you in the back. It's just all around uncomfortable to have it. So they decided to develop a capsule type magazine that held 10 rounds. And the way that it worked was it would be on the side of the gun and wrap all the way around the gun. They fitted it onto the Jarman in 1884 and took it to Denmark for an open trial. The Danes asked to cut the 10 rounds down to 5 in order to cut down on the bulk of the magazine because it was kind of, it wrapped too much around. It was a little bulky. They decided, let's just kind of cut it down a little bit. And so they did. And so the two guys decided, okay, yeah, let's cut it in half. They took it down to 5 rounds, and then it came out looking the way it does now, where it is 5 rounds going up and underneath the bolt and then feeding in from the left side. And in order to do that, though, they couldn't just throw it onto a another gun, kind of Frankenstein it like they did. So what did they do? They went ahead and they designed a rifle specifically around that cylindrical magazine. And they did it right to Danish specs. Danish specs. I just pictured Danish wearing glasses. So they made it to Danish specs, and that was the first iteration of this gun, because that one did not look the same as this one. The original Danish one had a door that, instead of opening sideways like that, actually opened this direction. So where does the US fit into all of this? How did the United States get a Danish rifle made by Norwegians? Well, the United States was still using single-shot black powder trapdoor Springfield rifles at that time, and they decided, hey, we should probably change this, considering everybody else has way better rifles. So they decided, okay, let's figure out what we want to go with. And the funny part is, it actually kind of worked out in our favor, because other countries had changed like multiple times, going through multiple iterations of increasing firearms technology over 3 to 5 years. And so a lot of countries had already swapped over to repeating rifles. And because of that, we were actually so late to the game that, unlike other countries who had to go through multiple iterations of buy a rifle, it's immediately outdated, buy another rifle, that's immediately outdated, all the while spending tons and tons of money to retrofit their armies over and over again, up to like 3 or 4 times sometimes even. We skipped all that. We saved ourselves some money by being so late to the technology game that we're like, well, we're just gonna go with the newest thing. It's kind of like how every other country just updated their iPhone to the new version every year, 16, 17, and on. And then we are the United States who's got like an iPhone 7, and then the 17 comes out, and we're like, that one. We want that one. That's basically what happened. So we were able to get a repeating smokeless small bore rifle without all the headaches of constantly changing. Pretty great way to save money. And it's a good thing we saved the money in that aspect, because we ended up having a lot of issues with this that basically ate up all the money we saved. So in 1890, we decided to look at what rifles we were going to change to, because the United States was focused really on single-shot rifles, but with a magazine backup, because they had a marksmanship culture of one shot, one kill. They wanted a gun that had a magazine cutoff. Now, if you look on this side, this one has the magazine cutoff. You flip this switch, and now every time you change a round, you are not drawing from the magazine. And basically what that did is it allowed you to open the bolt, pull back, and put another round in, and take another round and simply put it in, load, and you're ready to go without drawing off your magazine. And the reason that the US kind of wanted that was because, again, it was a marksmanship culture. They really believed in taking aim, hitting one target, one kill with one bullet, and really making sure that you hit. Not really so much suppressive fire, but they did want the excess ammo in the magazine in case of a cavalry charge or something like that. Because remember, we're not at World War I yet. Tanks don't exist. You're still dealing with horses, okay? So, a cavalry charge comes in, then you eat into your magazine. But other than that, you take aim, hit your target, one shot, one kill. But there were other rifles at the time that had magazine cutoffs. So what was it about the KRAG that actually won them the contract? Well, it was the ability to top off your ammo. See, pretty much every other rifle at the time, you would have to open the bolt like this and put a new round in. Or you would have to open the rifle like this to put your stripper clip in to load the external magazine, right? Well, if your bolt is open like this, you can't fire, even if there's a round in the chamber. You're kind of, for all intents and purposes, screwed. But the KRAG, on the other hand, because it has that cutoff, and because you load from the side and not from the top, so essentially what that meant was you load one round in here, you close the bolt. Now you open the magazine to put more rounds in, but because you can have the bolt closed, even with the magazine door open, I could still fire this if I needed to in an emergency situation. Now, The other thing is, like I just said, topping off. Let's say I fire one shot, I load the next shot, and nothing else is happening now. Well, now if I wanted to go the alternative route and I just put five rounds into here and then close it up, chamber around. Okay, but now I only have 4 in there. But now I can top off. I can open it, put one more round in, close it, and now I have 6 total rounds. I could do that as many times as I want. Now, we officially adopted the rifle in 1892, but unfortunately, American manufacturers cried and whined about it, called it unfair, and sued. And so the United States Army had to go through all of these tests again. And, shocker, the KRAG won again. So basically, thank you for wasting all of our time. Now we've delayed putting this into production even more. So then after all the lawsuits and having to do the retest, we finally start trying to produce this rifle. But, a brand new rifle, new platform, with a new type of cartridge, well, that equals 99 problems, and the KRAG is 1, plus the other 98. And, you've got problems here and problems there. You've got pierced primers, eroded barrels from the corrosive new powder, no sights because of stamping issues. And this caused a large delay in the finished product. Testing the cartridge takes months, and finally production ramps up in 1894, 2 years after we actually said, hey, this is the gun we want to use. 2 years. Adoption for our troops to this new platform was actually slightly difficult because they had never used a bolt-action rifle before. So getting into the habit of doing this was probably not that hard, but what was hard was because they were used to black powder rifles where they would fire with their middle finger and not their pointer finger, the way that they used to hold the rifle was with no bolt action and no lever in the way, and they would hold it like this. And because they would hold it like this, and that's what they were used to firing, when they started using these lever actions, when they would put the lever all the way down and they went to fire this gun, they would use their middle finger, and their pointer finger would actually slightly move this lever up just a little bit, just enough so this finger could be comfortable. But in the process of doing that, they would fire, and the bolt back here, what would happen is they would fire and this would fall forward, forcing this back down. But in that process, because their finger was in the way, it would actually slow down the drop of the pin just enough to cause light strikes. And so you would only get light strikes and it wouldn't fire. In addition to this, you also had some early ammo that was thin-walled, and you could get case head separation, causing gas to vent into the magazine, causing the magazine to blow open like this. And, then you're blowing out your ammo. Some of the ammo may fall out. It may damage the actual door as well. So they had a lot of problems to iron out. Part of the issue was that we didn't trial the gun. Like, yes, we tested it in order to figure out which of the guns we wanted, but instead of trialing it, we went straight to production and made a bunch of these things. And it's kind of like, instead of a sample size of like 1,000 guns, saying, okay, we've picked this and we don't know exactly what it's going to do. Let's make 1,000 of these, give them to some of our guys to kind of test. They'll give us feedback before we move into full production, and then we'll work out the kinks and then go ahead and put them into production at that point once we've figured out what we need to fix in the manufacture process to address the issues. Well, we didn't do that. So we went straight to production instead of making a sample size to work out the kinks. So we issued tens of thousands of kinky guns to soldiers, which, as I say, that gives a whole new meaning to sleeping with your rifle.
If you will sleep with your rifle, you will give your rifle a girl's name, because this is the only pussy you people are going to get.
The point is, we skipped a step and had to go and fix those problems on issued guns instead of fixing them prior to manufacture, which cost a ton of money. Basically, remember how I said before that we saved all that money by jumping straight ahead to the iPhone 17 from the iPhone 7? Yeah, we got an iPhone 17 that didn't have a working camera and the charging port worked 50% of the time. And then we had to reinvest some money to fix that. Yeah, that's basically what happened with this thing. By 1896, we ended up with so many changes to the gun from trying to work out all of those kinks. Basically, none of the guns had really any interchangeable parts. We had so many different variations of the same gun that it was almost impossible for a field armorer to like figure out how to fix that guy's gun versus that guy's gun. I mean, the field armorers probably hated this gun.
I hate it here!
So then we make the 1896 model with all of the new changes and some that we hadn't actually implemented yet to have one uniform gun. So that way we don't have to deal with all of these parts that are all over the place and no uniformity. 2 years later, in 1898, the Spanish-American War breaks out. And we don't have enough guns, probably because of all of the problems we had in manufacturing them and then having to try and swap into uniform guns. We only have 30,000, which was barely enough to outfit the Army regulars, but not any of the volunteer units. Those guys got the short end of the stick and ended up with the 45-70 trap doors, the single shots. Not the best. You're especially knowing that there's a better option and you're sitting there with a single shot rifle while you're looking at your buddy next to you who's got 6 shots and a whole bandolier full of extra ammo that he can just drop in and you take 30 seconds to reload. That must suck. While fighting with the Spanish, more problems with the platform started to show up. Due to the loose loading technique, so because they aren't clipped together at all, you had loose rounds, and so when you went to open the trap door to drop rounds in, well, if you're running or walking or sitting awkwardly and you go to load them in, you may actually drop a lot of them on the floor. So spilling ammo was actually really common. Hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammo were probably spilled. That problem, combined with a less powerful cartridge than the 1893 Mauser that the Spanish used, due to the fact that the KRAG only had one locking lug, as opposed to the double locking lugs of the Mauser. That meant that they were able to use a higher power cartridge than the American troops. The fighting with the Spanish only lasted for 4 months, with the United States gaining control of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Now, a lot of people like to say that this was only used in the Spanish-American War, and that's sort of true, but a continuation of that war was when the KRAG saw action immediately after that in the Philippines, when the Molson Moros, natives who had been fighting the Spanish, as soon as the army replaced the Spaniards, man, our troops met the full fury of the Moros, who wreaked a lot of havoc with their razor-sharp bolos, barongs, and krises. The insurgents also attempted to capture as many modern military rifles, both KRAGs and the Spanish guns, as much as possible. The army in the Philippines were well aware of the hate from the nationalist Filipino insurgents. KRAGs were always kept fully loaded during guard duty, and many bayonets were sharpened extra sharp. Any suspicious activity by unknown Filipinos lurking around the army posts resulted in shots fired, no questions asked. Just, hey, I see shadows. It's suspicious. Bang, bang. No questions asked. A saying among Americans during this period was, "Crag 'em and bag 'em." There were numerous small-scale but very bloody engagements between American soldiers and the insurgents, especially the fierce Moros. Like present-day Islamic extremists, the Moros believed that they would be granted carnal rewards in the afterlife if they shed blood of basically the infidels on earth. Some of the Moros reportedly bound their limbs with cords like anticipatory tourniquets to inhibit blood loss if wounded, and worked themselves into a religious frenzy before going juramento. There were many instances where mortally wounded Moros hacked American soldiers to death before dying themselves. As correctly stated by Colonel Shockley, quote, A crazed Moro imbued with the spirit of killing just couldn't be stopped by a leg or chest shot from a Krag. Because of this, and because of the fact that these guys seemed like they couldn't be stopped, our troops sought ways to increase the Krag's stopping power, including filing the tip of the bullet to create dum-dum ammunition, as they called it, or pulling out the bullet and reinserting it backwards with the flat base facing forward. A gruesomely illustrative example was related by Colonel Shockley. Quote, during the American occupation, a corporal and 2 privates were on guard. 3 Moros, disguised as hucksters, approached the 3 guards, suddenly throwing their bundles to the ground, each with a raised kris, which had been sharpened and polished for the occasion, dashed toward the alert guards. 3 Krag rifles with bayonets affixed came up, and 3 shots shattered the stillness. The first Moro, hit in the face, dived into the coral sand. He had been shot between the eyes, and the bullet tore out the back of his head. The second Moro, hit in the midsection, doubled up and then sat down. But the third, shot through the chest, continued his rush. The corporal thrust his bayonet, and the Moro Moslem frenzy forced his body to receive the whole of it, clear to the muzzle. The downward swing of the kris split the corporal's skull to the teeth. The cartridges had been dum-dum. So essentially, I mean, they tried their best, but these cartridges being lower in power combined with, just not that much stopping power, really didn't do as much as they were hoping. So they tried to make them a little bit more deadly, and even that didn't work too well, as we just saw. The American government organized and equipped the Filipino constabulary, basically the police, and gradually turned the problem of putting down the insurrectionists over to the Filipino allies. After the turn of the century, a number of 1899 Krag carbines, along with a few 1898 carbines, were altered for the police to use by fitting them with cut-down 1898 Krag rifle stocks equipped with sling swivels and bayonet lugs. The ends of the larger diameter carbine barrels were lathe-turned down in order to permit the use of the standard bayonet. These modified Krag carbines resembled miniature rifles and are typically known today as Philippine constabulary rifles, which, from my understanding, are actually quite rare. However, this was not the only other place, besides the Spanish-American War, that we saw the Krag in use. Combat use of the American Krag around the turn of the century was not limited to the Philippines. Unrest in China during the rise of the Boxers, who saw foreign devils as the reason for the nation's problems, they went on a rampage of murder against foreigners in China, and a number of nations sent military units to go and help and try and protect the respective citizens. One of the most famous incidents was the siege at the International Legation at Peking in 1900, where a number of foreigners, including some Americans, were trapped behind the legation walls by Boxers intent on massacring everybody inside. In the front lines of the defenders of the legation was a contingent of U.S. Marines armed with Lee Navy rifles. In order to raise the siege, several nations dispatched troops, and the legation was eventually rescued. Some of the American units that participated in the International Relief Column included the Army's 9th and 14th Infantry Regiments, and a contingent of U.S. Marines, all armed with Krag rifles. The Boxer Rebellion marked the end of the 1895 Lee Navy's tenure as a frontline U.S. military arm, as it was replaced in U.S. Navy and U.S. Marine Corps service during this period by the Krag. The Krag remained the standard U.S. military rifle until the introduction of the U.S. rifle caliber 30 model 1903, which was designed to both replace the Krag rifle and carbine. Even after adoption of the 03, Krag remained in service until the end of the first decade of the 20th century, by which time it was completely replaced in frontline service by the New Springfield. But that didn't stop the Krag rifle from appearing in the next war. A number of Krag rifles actually lingered in the military arsenal, and some saw supplemental service in the First World War. After America entered the war in April of 1917, many recruits were training with dummy guns or even broom handles because there was such a shortage of the 1903s. As more trainees arrived, the Army turned to its supply of Krag rifles. Estimates show that there was approximately 150,000 Krag rifles, mostly the 1898 version, stored in American ordnance depots during mid-1917. The KRAGs came out of storage and served in several army training camps during 1917, and were later issued to trading organization based at many large universities. There are some records to suggest that these were actually issued to U.S. Army engineers in France, but they probably didn't see, frontline service, simply because shortly after they were issued, they were kind of a stopgap until they could get more of the actual frontline rifles. Once they got more of those, they just swapped these out. And then shortly after the war, they pretty much just took all of these rifles and sold them to the NRA civilian marksmanship programs, or simply surplus them out, and they ended up in the hands of normal Americans. And a lot of them have been sporterized, like this one here. Does not have the front sights, as you can see. Well, sorry, it doesn't have the original iron sights, as you can see here, because, these little holes there. And it also doesn't have the top wood anymore either. What was added, however, was this aftermarket pinhole sight, which I actually kind of like it. I do, but it's because it's for sporting purposes. If you're trying to make any longer shots, like it would be kind of difficult because you don't have a way to range it with the pinhole sight. The other thing is, I have found this to be an issue, but you can't really see it, or maybe you can, but this front post here is actually kind of bent, and I've had to bend that front sight post back like 2 or 3 times at this point. And it's just because it's so easy to bend. You put something down wrong on it, you put it down the wrong way, it bends. So I can only imagine if that is one of the original sights on the front there, constantly having to replace that would be a pain in the ass too. This thing is pretty old. 1899, that's 126 years, I want to say. Yeah, it's like a 126-year-old gun, and it looks like it has still its original furniture here. Not this top part here, because that's not on there anymore, I don't think. And it's got a little crack, a chip out of here, but overall it's pretty nice. One of the features it has here is, I don't know if I can get it open, this little butt plate on the back. So you would actually have cleaning rods. This is where you would store the cleaning rods, was in this little hole back here. There's no cleaning rods in this one, unfortunately. It didn't come with them. But that's where those would be stored, in the back there. And it actually, because they cut that little hole out to put those cleaning rods back there, it does kind of make this like just slightly front heavy, but it's not really that big of a deal. It probably shaved off a little bit. Like I said, it's probably about 9-ish pounds or so. But overall, it's a pretty interesting gun. But anyway, guys, that was the 1899 KRAG-JORGENSEN, a review and a brief history. Tell me, do you guys like this kind of video? Do you want to see more of this kind of video? And tell me what you guys think. Do you own one of these pieces of U.S. history? And if so, do you have the original and not a sporterized version? Tell me in the comments down below. I appreciate each and every one of you guys for watching. Make sure to go down to the description and check out some of my affiliates. I didn't really mention them in the video because this is a historical video, and I wanted to, make it a really good video for you guys. But if you check those out, those would help me out. Also, if you do want to check out another one of my historical videos, though, I do have another historical video that I will link in a card right here. It's about one of the people of the Revolutionary War, which I found quite interesting. So if you'd like to check that out, go ahead and click that card. Let me know, do you want to see more of this type of content? This video took me a decent amount of time to make, and I actually shortened a lot of the information that I found down to this to give you kind of like all the bullet points. And it was a lot of fun to make, but it was a lot of work. So if you guys like this content, please let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, guys, I appreciate each and every one of you guys, and I will see you guys in the next one.